Welcome, Dr. Nick. Good to see you again. All right, so we're going to talk about Norfolk Southern and their greed, which is ridiculous. I mean, we know this because of East Palestine, but all right, I found this headline and it's a little misleading, a little bit, but Norfolk Southern's huge profits go 80% to top honchos checks, and I'm reading that. I'm like, wait a minute, 80% of the profits for Norfolk Southern are going to the executives? Well, not exactly, but it sounds good, and it got me to stop. So union safety specialists and now the residents of East Palestine have contended that corporate greed drove Norfolk Southern Railway to cut corners on safety inspections and prevention, thus leading to the disastrous February 3rd wreck there. We know this. But buried deep in the March 31st Federal Justice Department filing for both itself and the U.S. DEP or EPA against Norfolk Southern U.S. District Court in Cleveland comes confirmation of the extent of that greed, and it's mind-boggling. This is from People's World. So to be precise, quote, 80% of the compensation, unquote, for Norfolk Southern's top honchos, including its CEO, depends on how big its profit margin is. The larger the profit, the larger their pay. That's an incentive to reduce human safety inspections, let experienced workers go, force remaining workers to shoulder jobs they weren't trained for, and line up rail cars in an unsafe way with heavy tank cars in the rear to satisfy their profit model, precision scheduled railroading, and cut trains just to just one crew member, the engineer of the rail union said. All right, so that the only...
You've got heavy rails at the rear. Heavy rail cars.
Yep.
What?
The Fed seek millions of dollars in damages from Norfolk Southern, in addition to forcing it to pay for cleanup costs from the wreck. All they've been talking about is paying for the wreck. Fines for violating Clean Water Act and CERCLA, more commonly known as the Superfund law, which covers cleaning up toxic waste, would reach $120,000 a day for each day Norfolk Southern doesn't comply. Not very much.
Superfund.
Yep. Superfund. Not super fun.
Not the Superfund law.
No.
Yeah.
Well, some 38 of the train's 150 cars derailed, including 11 which carried hazardous chemicals, monochloride, ethylene glycol monobutyl ether, ethyl hexyl acrylate, butyl acrylate, isobutylene, and benzene residue. We talked about this. Aaron Brockovich talked about this weeks ago when we covered this. 5 more cars carried oil, and another had fuel additives. Shout out to United for East Palestine, the organizing group, and the RVO, I believe, the River Valley Organizers, another group that's doing terrific work to try to raise awareness, keep the pressure on. Andrew Weldon, who is doing the independent testing. I know Misty's having United for East Palestine on again tomorrow night on her radio show tomorrow night on TNT Radio, 11 Eastern, tntradio.live.
Nice.
DOJ's filing explains Norfolk Southern Corporation's chieftains, who are one and the same as the railroad's leaders, are judged on performance metrics, we know, which focus on measures such as operating ratio, operating income for its subsidiaries. The railroad, with 35,000 miles of track nationwide, is the chief subsidiary. Okay, so operating ratio looks at operating expenses as a percentage of revenue. Operating income looks at the operating revenue less operating expenses. So the more they can cut expenses, the more revenue they get, the more money their bonus is going to be. These financial metrics were selected to motivate and reward NS Corp's executives for increasing revenue, like I said, improving operating efficiency, and reducing expenses of its railroad subsidiaries. They achieve these metrics by controlling operations, which includes the operations of the railway, right? So approximately 80% of the compensation for the executives are based on the performance metrics, the Justice Department asserted. So all their money basically is coming from how much profit they can squeeze out. In plain English, the executives get rewarded if they cut costs, but the biggest cost is workers, which leads to cuts in safety. Quote, over the past 4 years, annual reports show a stark contrast between the increases in operating income and the drop in railroad operating costs. The drop includes reductions in spending to repair, service, and maintain locomotives and freight cars, perform train inspections, and pay engine crews and train crews. Bastards.
Yep. I mean,
Rick-
welcome to every industrial industry now.
Yeah, but this one's a monopoly, an effective monopoly.
Yeah, all of them are.
No.
I mean, technically all. I mean,
No, you cannot.
Generally, yes, because, bro, stop for a second, and I'm talking about most of the industrial industries right now have failing infrastructure because of this right here.
Sure.
Same thing.
But you cannot go to another railway, is my point. Unless you move to another part of the country.
I get that.
That's my point, is there's one.
Yes. Yeah.
And why the hell would you want to work for them?
Yeah, but there's also, they're also per each region, there's only one.
Right.
And you don't think they all go, their CEOs go to coffee? It's just slightly getting around trust laws, which is, trust laws were invented partially because of these companies.
Right. What they do today is important for the future. They mothball equipment or drive people off their jobs. A point of both RWU and the rail unions have repeatedly made to federal regulators. Shout out to RWU also. That's the Railroad Workers Union. And one of their 30 longtime members who just recently retired also has been on Misty's radio show a couple times recently. Go to mistywinston.substack.com. You can see all her guests, listen to all the old shows, everything. But that drives up profits now, pay envelopes of managers, and cost of safety and service in the future. But they don't necessarily feel that right away. Railroads say they don't need to justify their cost cutting.
Yep.
I've heard the Association of American Railroads, the lobby for all rail carriers, not just a few big freight lines such as Norfolk Southern, tell the Maryland General Assembly Committee that if you want to do the things that we've done for 150 years, such as two-worker crews, you have to document that it's safer than what the railroads plan.
Oh, okay.
But if we want to change things, we don't have to document the impact the railroad lobbies rep said. I mean, it's wow.
That's the lobby rep saying the truth. I mean,
right?
Yeah, but we don't got
for the train companies, right? But in their prepared statements, neither Attorney General Merrick Garland nor the EPA administrator mentioned corporate greed as the ultimate cause of the cost cutting, which led to the derailment. They focus instead on getting the railroad to pay for all the cleanup costs and the threat of fines if it flunks. Problem's going to be that the railroad's going to end up declaring bankruptcy in the end. They'll
Yeah. And it'll get liquidated, and all those assets will move to some other group that will not only take all of the old bosses, all the shareholders will be just fine going other places, right? And they'll also just take all the assets.
Kinko's became FedEx. FedEx bought Kinko's.
Yes.
So the EPA administrator, Regan, not Brian Regan, cup of dirt. From the very beginning, I pledged to the people of East Palestine that EPA would hold Norfolk Southern fully accountable for jeopardizing the community's health and safety. No community should have to go through what East Palestine's residents have faced, gaslight. With today's action, we are once more delivering on our commitment to ensure Norfolk Southern cleans up the mess and pays for the damage they inflicted as we work to ensure this community can feel safe at home again. That's nice. That's nice. But it's just words.
Yep.
And that's just money.
Words.
And we can actually create the money right now. We could create the money. We could give them Medicare for all for life. We could take care of these people. We could compensate them for their homes more than $10,000, which is what they're trying to do. Gross. We live in hell. I swear. We live in hell.
We're fucked.
Yes, thank you, Misty. We are fucked. Okay, so yes, everyone's a programmer now. Greg saying gaming industry terrible for workers. Yes, they do. They do workers dirty.